right, everybody, it's part two of the readings for the progressive era. I'm going to be quick here because a lot of this is something that I'll just have kind of on the screen for you to be able to answer. So before this, we talked about the muckrakers. We talked about certain progressive movement goals, essentially. And a couple of these, again, political reform is the big one. They're just trying to get rid of the people who are extorting companies or getting extorted by companies as well. It's not a good thing. You never want your politicians to have a hidden agenda outside of what's good for the people. Anti-alcohol reform, it's over here. It's the temperance movement. If you are temperate, what you're essentially saying is that you are abstaining from alcohol. You're not drinking alcohol. You don't agree with it, whether for religious reasons or personal reasons. It's kind of different, up to you. Again, the Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League worked against, a saloon is again a bar, so it's like anti-bar, to prohibit alcohol, which then became the cause of a lot of social problems. So they're saying, there's issues with, whether it be domestic violence, husbands coming home, hurting their wives or kids. One of the reasons why is because of alcohol. That's basically one of the bigger issues that they saw there. Even certain bosses, big time, corporation owners, Henry Ford. Henry Ford has been quoted saying that he thought alcohol was one of the biggest issues in America because his workers were coming to work drunk or hungover or whatever, and it's not good. It's not good for business. So Prohibition happens. All right, Prohibition ends up being the 18th Amendment. All right, and what happens is that it actually makes the production or manufacturing, sale, and transport of alcohol illegal in the United States. And this happens in 1919. Okay, so in 1919, all right, again, 101 years ago, alcohol was illegal in the United States. Now, you could drink alcohol. So let's say, for instance, I had this is my water jug. Let's say that this is gin or something like that. If I had it in the street at that time period, which one, you're not allowed to drink in the street, but if I had it in, like, let's say I'm in New York City, I'm on the sidewalk and I'm drinking this, as long as I'm not selling it, producing it myself, or moving it from one place to another, I'm fine. All right, so if the police see me and I'm like, well, it's just mine, it's my own supply that I make at my house, that I drink myself, and I don't sell it to anybody, I'm okay. Okay, but as soon as I make it for sale, no bueno. Okay, so that's kind of the problem there. All right, so that was kind of an interesting thing. And how do you police that? You really can't. It's very tough. So that's why it's the only amendment that's been completely nullified or canceled. So the 18th Amendment will last for about 13 years. All right, and in 1932, it'll go away. All right, so let's look into this. I'm on the left side, political reform. There's a lot of different political reforms. The 16th and the 17th Amendment, we talked about this before. The 16th Amendment is income tax, and the 17th Amendment is the idea that you can elect your senators directly. This was something that wasn't able to be done beforehand. Right, again, gave people the right to vote to elect senators directly rather than often what we would call state legislatures, kind of corrupt. All right, education reform. All right, we all talk about this a lot. We think education is important. I think everybody thinks it's a great idea to have an educated populace, the educated people in your society, but there's only a couple people who have a plan or it's legit, and that's one of them is John Dewey, creator of the Dewey Decimal System. And again, settlement houses offered usually a lot of education. Our first real kindergarten classes happened in a place like Hull House by Jane Addams. Labor reform, we're talking about an 8-hour workday. All right, so things that they really cared about. All right, we cared about an 8-hour workday. They cared about days that you could have off, sick leave, that kind of thing. Just basic things today that we kind of take for granted. A minimum wage. They talked about a minimum wage, all right, which, again, today we're talking about a minimum wage that, handwriting, that could possibly be $15 an hour. That's something that's been talked about. It's more livable wage, okay? All right, so there's those concepts right there. All right, as we scroll down, not only are we talking about labor reform in the fact of like working hours and money, we're also talking about safety, guys. So a simple process in that is it comes from this triangle shirtwaist fire that happened in 1911. It was awful. About 150, mostly women, mostly immigrant women, died because there were no exit doors. Everything was locked. The managers didn't trust the workers, so they basically were stuck. They were trapped. And even then, like again, you think of fire, so fire department would show up, right? No, wrong. So the fire department had a ladder that could go up to about 10 stories. And this particular shirtwaist fire happened on like the 13th level of the factor of the building it was on. So the 13th story, that's you can't get to it. People were not saved. So basically, these people were trapped. Mostly women. Again, women who were immigrants were trapped. And so we're really just talking about here. We're talking about safety. Okay, we're talking about like safe parameters. That's why today there's a thing called OSHA. OSHA, OSHA. Sorry for my handwriting. It's really tough with this marker here. OSHA. Okay, it's the idea of safety in the workplace. So one of the reasons why we have certain things the way that we do. That's why there's an escape or an exit door in most levels of buildings. There's fire hydrants in certain spots. You have sprinklers, obviously, that would, if there was a fire, the sprinklers would then turn on. So, again, that's why we do what we do. All right, women's rights. All right, this is huge. It's a big deal. Okay. Women's rights, again, once slavery was banned, many former abolitionists turned to their attentions to women's suffrage. Women's suffrage. Suffrage means the right to vote. And in 1869, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, NASSA, was formed, and some of its leaders included, famously, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, two really big names there, and also Anna Howard Shaw and Carrie Chapman Catt, which, again, very big deal. The 19th Amendment here is crucial because it gives women the right to vote. So women now had the right to vote since the year 1920 with the 19th Amendment. Super important. Now you've got the whole population who is above the age of 18 or 18 or older can now vote, which is pretty awesome. Anti-discrimination movements. I'm not going to go into crazy details here, but I do want to tell you, obviously, it's all kinds of groups. You have the American Jewish Committee. You have the Society of American Indians or Natives for Native Rights. Anti-Semitism. All right, it's a fight against anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish belief. You even had a Mexican-American group, the Mutualistas, which is just the idea of, again, fighting for their rights as well, especially living conditions in their neighborhoods. Famously, you have a group called the NAACP. I'm going to go down a little bit so I can kind of talk to you about that. It's on the next page. All right, that's why I can't see it. Right? Yes. And it's created by a guy named W.E.B. Du Bois, and then the opposite kind of view is by Booker T. Washington. Both of these guys will kind of butt heads on the same issues, even though they want the same corrections. So it's almost kind of like you have two different, I would say it's like having two different coaches. You have a coach who's like, well, the goal is to win. And the other coach says the goal is to win. But the idea between how to win is probably different. All right. So which coach is right? Well, it depends on the team. It depends on the time period. It depends on who you're playing against, his styles. Same thing here. So Booker T. Washington literally believed that in order for African Americans to feel like they're equal in society, they needed to have financial backing. They needed to be able to have a job, feel good about that job, make money in that job, and that's one of the keys to equality in their society. African Americans preserved equality and automatically follow. It says, again, the idea is if we make money, and we can make money within the white man's system, is what he's trying to say. All right, especially in Atlanta, Georgia, which is basically where he is. He had what we call the Atlanta Compromise. all right, with Southern white leaders. What he's trying to state is that if the white man can give a black man a job, you're giving a black man equality. All right, the idea that if they can make their own money, now they feel like they're a part of society. So that was Booker T. Washington's idea. So he was more focused on the dollar, helping out black population. W.E.B. Du Bois is kind of more along the lines of today, all right, with like maybe the Black Lives Matter movement and really just civil rights in general, way ahead of his time. Where on the opposite side of the spectrum, W.E. Du Bois believed that legal equality for African Americans would put an end to injustice. He wanted all laws to be equal. Okay, he said that's the only way you're going to get equality is when you have all laws equal. Now, I know what you're thinking. Aren't all men and women created equal under the law? No, not really. It's yes in theory, but not in practice, and that's kind of the problem here. That's a problem in our society right now. We're talking about this constantly. I'm going to scroll down, by the way. All right, and W.E. Du Bois, super smart guy. Education reform, big thing. He talked about the talented 10th, right? The idea of like 10%, 10th of 1% of people are going to be leaders in society. All right, so a very small percentage. He said, but these leaders are really going to be the ones who create the change, the social change in society for African Americans in general. All right. Now, what about him? Well, again, he creates the NAACP. I've stumbled on that a couple times, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and still around today, all right, NAACP. And the idea is that we as a society need to continue to fight for treatment under the law equally and give opportunities to people of all colors equally. All right, so the problem is this. We see this a lot in our society. If you haven't, go check it out right now. Where in the same state, in the same town sometimes, you can have a judge give a punishment to somebody of color and they do a crime, okay? Been committed, guilty, the whole thing, okay, that's fine, all right? And then given a certain punishment. And yet somebody of a different color, right, say they're white, commits a crime, they are given a different punishment under the law. That's not right. So what W.E.B. Du Bois is really arguing here is saying that if there's any inequality at all under the justice system, there's no equality in society. Okay, and so it's a constant battle. The NAACP is always fighting for the advancement to get people of color to better spots, to better places. And until they're the leaders in society, in regular society, then you'll start to see more of a trickle down equality. Some of the more influential leaders of this time period in the African American realm, George Washington Carver. All right, might sound corny, but peanut butter is George Washington Carver's one of his claims to fame. And the idea obviously is essentially that he's creating alternatives for peanuts and other crops that were alternatives to cotton. Why? Because cotton's always been collectively seen of as the slavery crop in America. And so if you are African American, you don't like cotton. You don't like your ancestors were brought here to farm cotton. You yourself may be a sharecropper in cotton at this time period in the 1880s, going into the 1900s. Not positive. So to create any alternatives to that would be to be in the advancement of colored people. Okay, guys, this was part 3. It was a little shorter. Pay attention. This is part 2. Part 3 is coming up right now.